Welcome, everyone. We have this idea that I wanted to talk about today a little bit about independence, and that many people, I think, feel like they need to be free of or independent of something else that is holding them back, right? Something that's like sort of stuck or keeping them stuck. And actually, I believe, at least from a Buddhist perspective and meditation theory perspective, what we're really being held back by is our own mind, the limitations of our own perceptions, our own feelings, right? Our own thoughts, I guess, and our actions. And to some extent, there's the idea that you actually could maybe change your life if maybe we knew how to do it. And I think a lot of people feel crappy, they feel shitty that they can't make changes that they want to make, even if they wouldn't admit it, even secretly inside. I'm not losing weight, or I'm not getting the money I need. I don't really have the love that supports me. I don't have the things I really believe I should have in life. And we have those stories, and those stories stay pretty solid in our mind because it's almost like we're attached to having the story. Like we believe we're poor, or we believe we're victimized. And in fact, there may be real societal evidence to support that. We may be in a low economic bracket. We may be from situations that have brutalized us and victimized us. The problem is that those things happen, but that problem becomes compounded when they force us to believe that those things are evidence of our lack of self-worth. The people in the communities in Baltimore that Mo was referring to, actually just believing that this is the way they had to live because no one regarded or respected them enough, and that other people that had more money believe that those people chose to live like that because they didn't have the wherewithal to hitch up their bootstraps and that kind of thing. All of these belief systems keeping everybody sort of stuck. And I lived in Baltimore for a while, and to actually see the vibrance and the beauty and the spectacular wisdom in that community, which is extraordinary. For people into art, particularly left of center art, outsider art, and so forth, that is the Mecca on at least the East Coast of the United States. I mean, the theater, the actual art, the music, it's vibrant and it's intense. The African American culture is really rich, and the jazz clubs and the hip hop clubs and the downtown scene, and all of that is really wonderful. And in the middle of that, the largest swaths of completely underdeveloped, under supported, and under-regarded parts of the city, 60% of the city living in what would be considered poverty conditions. And of that, probably half of it in dire, real, dangerous, right, situations. So Johns Hopkins University is in the middle of that, right in the middle of one of the biggest stretches of the hood, so to speak. And it started doing tests and sort of experiments and research on what it takes socially to get neighborhoods to change. And so what I mentioned in the reading was the idea that they had, where they took a test house and they completely renovated. Well, I'm talking about a brownstone or building, apartment building, I guess. And they put businesses downstairs, and they made this beautiful place in the middle of an otherwise kind of derelict and dangerous block. seeing how much that would maybe lift and spur kind of economic kind of energy, something like that. And in fact, the opposite happened. The building was eventually withered, and it became, you know, succumbed to the environment. And the point is that many of us want to make changes in our life, but we don't put ourselves in an environment that supports that change, right? We put ourselves in environments that actually degrade the change, make the change even harder to deal with. Now, that particular neighborhood that I was referring to, and a lot of the inner city neighborhoods have started making changes. And those changes have come about in ways that are really interesting. One of the ways that Baltimore started working with crime in particular is to go to the central power point of the very inner city. When you go to the very heart of the hood, so to speak, and you go to the deepest part of the power are the grandmothers. The grandmothers who all wear their Sunday hats and walk around. And literally when the grandmothers come out, the gangs stop shooting, or they will withdraw, or they'll pull away, right? Nobody messes with the grandmothers, right, in the city. The unspoken feeling is that this is the heart of the culture of their community. So the violence and difficulty and drugs, that's all sort of on the outside of that. It's the ways that people have of trying to express themselves, trying to find some kind of a living in an environment where they're just not offered the support by the government or by the city or by the society around them to do anything but sell drugs or beat up on each other or create problems. And one of the ways that people in power have always kept people out of power to be out of power is to hobble those people by having them fight against themselves. So one of the great tragedies of what you hear about the violence of Baltimore being one of the murder capitals, well, that's black on black murder. That doesn't make it less, and it doesn't make it less important. It makes it, to me, very tragic, because it's the very people who actually could be helped to make a vibrant and rich community really come to life, fighting amongst themselves. That kind of problem. And that becomes the issues that we all live with in terms of materialism. When we bite the bullet, or I'm sorry, bite the hook, and start to fall for this dream of materialism that we want more and more and more, and that we need more and more, and that status is what's important, and that taking care and protecting ourselves above everything else is what's really important. We actually lose sight of the greatest power right here at our fingertips, which is the immense power of connecting to the community around us. What would, particularly in Baltimore, but in America anywhere, what would a culture be like if it was only like you are, right? If that's who the people are people like you. What makes us strong, or what makes anybody strong, is the diversity and the differences. Same is true for each of us. So this isn't a talk on how to develop societies or how to, bring, urban renewal to inner city areas. This is a talk, it's an analogy on how we look at and stigmatize certain parts of our own psychology and our own mind. That there are huge, dark blocks of frightening areas that we don't want to go to in our own psychology and in our own mind. The way Baltimore started working through it, the way Detroit is working through it a little bit, the way Memphis has worked off and on sometimes through it, is to reach in to the grandmothers, to the culture, and to begin to find a connection to the basic goodness, the vibrance of the communities. and sort of allow them to come alive. That's what we need to do personally, is stop worrying about the problems and why the problems are there. I don't know why I spent so much time in my life trying to worry about all the crap that I could have avoided and didn't avoid. So I did it, and now I'm worried about why I did it. And instead of living the life I have now, I'm spending so much time regretting, so much time trying to change history in my brain, so much time trying to affect something different instead of just accepting what's actually here now. If you hate what's here now, then I don't think it could be changed. But if somehow we can fall in love with what's here, our fear, our doubt, our confusion, our darkness, our illness, our incapabilities, if we could actually begin to gain compassion and caring kindness for the totality of who we are, then I believe that who we are will begin to develop. So in the talk, I kind of stole a little bit from the Buddhist teachings and kind of set up a step-by-step process. The first step being acceptance, of course. The next step being a sense of willingness, that I'm actually willing to be part of this. Not just, so the acceptance isn't just deadened, like, okay, and this is out of my control, so I'm accepting it. But then adding a sense of willingness, lifting ourselves up and being able to say, okay, but I can move forward. Not because I hate what's here, because I love what's here, but I owe it to what's here to move forward. We owe it to the communities in the middle of the hood to really come alive and vibrant and totally influence our cultures, because that's what our cultures need. They need the vibrance of that energy. They need the connectivity of other humans from different points of view. Well, we need that too. So whatever part of ourselves that we could actually begin to open to and actually begin to encourage it. The third step is the sense of bravery, that we would have the bravery to move beyond our fear and actually do something new. And that bravery, that step, that third step, is about the bravery to make mistakes, to make always new mistakes, because mistakes are how we learn. Failing that, if we never make mistakes, it would mean we're not trying. Let's face it, because the only way we could keep from making mistakes is to just keep ourselves locked up with these images of perfectionism and never, ever do anything. And a lot of us do that. A lot of us fall into that habit. I do that a lot. I start thinking about, well, it should be this instead of that. And so I don't actually get the work I need to get done to build anything, if that makes sense. Or to be really kind of just personal about it, like with writing, you think about what your book is going to be like, and the way what the interviews around the book will be like. What does the jacket look like? What is the title, right? Spending all this time working on titles and never actually beginning to just write. Just sit down and begin the process of writing, because it's all got to be bigger than we want it to be. It's all got to be perfect. We're sort of afraid to just do a post and have the English bad, or to actually write something and have somebody misunderstand it, or to just kind of not be perfect. And then what begins to happen is we start to be able to work with that and adjust that. So one mistake leads to a response, which leads perhaps to another mistake, which leads to a response. And every now and then we hit with something beautiful, but that really, whether it's a mistake or whether it's something beautiful, real difference does it make? The point is really that we're getting out, that we're actually doing it, that we're not locked in the community in our mind of defeat, but that we're actually going out to really make a connection. And, you know, that's the fourth stage, of course, is the complete connectivity to the world, to be able to actually take this out to the world itself, you know, to take our little problem and become an activist, to take our issue and actually, you know, bring it out to something big and important, to actually wake ourselves up. Now, on the personal level, on our individual personal levels, in terms of our practice, what we're talking about here is having the acceptance of who we are, and then the willingness to open up to our basic goodness, our fundamental goodness and Buddha nature, and to be able to then extend that out, move beyond our fear, and start to begin to wake up, and to bring that waking up into the world altogether. That's the four-step process, which parallels or is stolen from the four stages of the mind of enlightenment of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta beginning with acceptance or loving kindness, and then deepening right into a sense of compassion, that caring, that bravery, and then going out into this extreme connectivity and joy, and then bringing that into the whole world with this sense of equanimity. And that four-step process, to make it more practical before we end, is something that we could do both in our practice, but also in our life. But it actually reduces down to the idea that we could start to really honor and respect ourselves for what we have. And instead of beating ourselves up for the things that aren't the way we would like them to be, we could actually accept what's here and then create this energy to find out what's next. Not what we want, but what's actually next, and to actually go beyond that and connect to the world. So any artist kind of knows that the concept of what you want to create is death to your creation frequently. I guess there are some artists that create that way, conceptual artists, such, but I think for most artists, the active creativity leads to a lot of precarious places that we don't really know what's next. And we're taking another leap and then another leap and sort of going out beyond ourselves. Either that, or we could just write the same old thing again and again and again and again, the same old sitcom in our mind. One of my favorite writers in college was Harold Pinter. I'm a theater person, so he was a playwright and a theater director and an actor. And so he was a lifelong theater person and married to theater people and involved in the theater world in a way. But his plays were startling and strange and unusual, and they did arrest people. They did kind of create a kind of a real wake-up call in the theater of his day, in the modern theater. And he said in an interview that one of the most frightening things that he experienced, and he created the caveat, going full circle to the dangerous neighborhoods idea, that he grew up in East London at a time when East London was really bad and dangerous, and he was Jewish, which was never an easy upbringing in the working class world in those days, in the 50s. And he actually lived with a lot of potential violence and danger around him. He said the most frightening thing he ever endured was the blank page that he sees every day when he sits down to write. That blank page in the typewriter if you remember typewriters. If you don't, I'll explain that to you. But the idea of just putting up your Word document and all of a sudden there's nothing there yet written, and how frightening that is, because you don't know what's going to happen next. And to face that again and again, to actually just have a smile in your heart and go, okay, great, let me just do the next right thing, you know. And his plays in particular were very much like that. He would just start out of nowhere, and what would happen next would be the thing that naturally followed next. He never had an ulterior motive of what he was going to write about. He never had a story he was going to tell. Now, I understand that's a rarefied point of view. Not everybody writes from that perspective. But I thought there was something incredibly meditative, and he became extraordinarily renowned, not in the public eyes so much because, you know, his plays were kind of hard to experience sometimes, but they were so alive and so vibrant and just so amazing because they always were written completely spontaneously, and they developed right from the ground. And there was always that level of fear of what will be the next thing, and will that be a mistake or will that not be a mistake? I kind of love that.